Overnight, the outrage over an election, sparking protests from coast to coast and cities in between. In Oakland, what started as a peaceful protest quickly turning violent, demonstrators burning flags and vandalizing cars. In San Diego, police struggling to keep control of scores of demonstrators. In New York, thousands of protesters chanting and banging drums as they marched past Rockefeller Center up 6th Avenue, blocking off streets above Trump Tower. And back in Los Angeles overnight, hundreds of people shut down a major highway through downtown LA, many struggling to come to grips with the reality of a new president-elect.
Portland has seen a third night of protests following the election of Donald Trump as the 45th US president. There are reports that a man was shot in the leg on Morrison Bridge as demonstrators marched against the president-elect. The unrest was described as a riot by police on Thursday, citing extensive criminal and dangerous behavior. In Miami, hundreds of Not My President protesters took to the streets carrying signs and flags, claiming the Trump victory will hurt women, the LGBT community and immigrants. More marches have been planned to counter the Trump presidency and the Republican majority in both houses. Rallies have been organised for later today in New York and LA, and a protest is planned for Washington on January the 20th, when the New York businessman succeeds President Barack Obama.
There are demonstrations in major American cities across the country tonight over the election of Donald Trump as president. Protesters gather in Philadelphia, Seattle, Boston, Portland, Oakland, California, Chicago, and New York tonight. The protest in New York has made its way to Trump Tower, where a large crowd has gathered.
They're saying, "Stop Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not our president." This was promoted by Socialist Advantage, and one of the things that they said the purpose of this rally for was to not only protest the election of Donald Trump as the 45th president of the United States, but also to protest that the Democratic Party had let them down with the nominee of Hillary Clinton.
In cities across the country, thousands took to the streets to voice their outrage over the election of Donald Trump.
The people united. We saw crowds actually being disruptive. And
on the West Coast, protesters set fires and faced off with police. In Los Angeles, hundreds ran onto Interstate 101, temporarily shutting it down.
That's total gridlock on the 101.
More than a dozen people were arrested there.
Trump has tapped into something very deep and dark and evil in our country.
Up to 10,000 people packed the streets of Midtown Manhattan, holding anti-Trump signs and blocking traffic. About 65 people were arrested near Trump Tower, mostly for disorderly conduct. And while there were some calls for unity, they were drowned out by frustration and fury.
Not my president!
Chants of "Not my president" stretched from Kansas City to Seattle. Thousands gathered outside Chicago's Trump Tower, where demonstrators shut down streets. In New Orleans,
No KKK, no fascist USA!
they burned a doll in Trump's image.
Not my president!
First round started this morning. Thousands of protesters took over the streets of LA. They were headed down Wilshire Boulevard toward the Federal Building downtown.
Ho ho! Donald Trump has got to go!
Most viewed this as a Trump protest. Possibly unaware, the organizers made it clear they don't like either party and encouraged protesters to bring flags from their home countries, which many did. Still, most protesters took aim at President-elect Donald Trump. There have been protests every day in Los Angeles since the elections. LAPD estimated 8,000 marching downtown to
No Trump! No KKK, no fascist USA!
Everyone we spoke with said they exercised their right to
News, the city of Portland, a riot zone tonight. At least 4,000 protesters in the streets, windows smashed, buildings spray painted, cars damaged. The big question, did police wait too long to move in with riot gear? And tonight, the anarchists, the people who wanted to cause trouble, joined those protests, damaging property as we're seeing here. Did police wait too long to move in tonight? Was that just a tough judgment call?
Well, it's a judgment call that we have to factor in a lot of different things to include the resources at our disposal, the crowd size, and just general crowd dynamics. With 4,000 estimated people in a crowd tonight, if we are going into arrest, a few people that had created damage, the crowd around them may not know that. They may not know why we're going in there, and It can turn very quickly. And we've seen plenty of times where just police presence can be a flashpoint for things happening, and we try to avoid that as much as we can.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. We're going to walk down to the Capitol. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
While inside, the vice president was whisked away by the Secret Service. As the mob moved in, the entire Capitol went into lockdown. The law enforcement presence was no match for the sheer size of the invasion, and now many facing...
And there's now smoke coming from over by the House gallery.
United States of America politely opening the door for terrorists who had scrawled on the door, "Murder the media," who had broken through this glass, letting them just walk through, letting these Trump supporters walk through freely and politely opening doors to the insurrectionists, and then letting the terrorists walk out of the same Capitol they had laid siege to and threatened the lives of members of the House and members of the Senate who they said they were coming to get, including Mike Pence. There has to be an investigation. How many of these Capitol Hill cops are members of Donald Trump's cult?
And I think one of the riddles that we need to ask is, just on a basic tactical level, why weren't there more Capitol Police present? Why didn't they call for backup sooner? How did they allow this breach to happen so quickly? So I very much want to underline that. I just want to make one other point. The officials that I've been talking to over the last several weeks, who, again, saw this crisis coming on January 6th, have been concerned above all about the danger that Donald Trump would try to draw the U.S. military into protecting his presidency, into his challenge of the election result, some new invocation of the Insurrection Act on his behalf to try to advance his cause. They were determined to keep the military out of any effort to challenge the election. And in that sense, I think we can be glad, even though the response looked awfully timid, that U.S. military troops were not involved.
This is looking at inside. Look at this. These protesters are inside Statuary Hall right now. You see the statues. This is a moment I never saw in my life. These individuals just rushed through security. They are inside Statuary Hall. This is a legendary place where all of us who've covered Capitol Hill, it's hard to believe what we're seeing right there. They're just walking through. Where are Capitol Police? It's an awful situation. They're having a good time in Statuary Hall. Jake Tapper, I don't know about you, but this is an incredibly dangerous situation that's unfolding here in the United States.
Our Capitol! Our Capitol!
Unnerving and remarkable scenes of chaos on the doorstep of the home of American democracy. Angry supporters of the president advancing on the Capitol.
USA! USA!
Tensions escalating quickly. Please. Officers tried to push back, firing pepper bullets into the agitated crowd. Trump supporters only grew bolder, and police lost control. They forced their way into the building, outnumbering the officers inside. One woman was shot and killed, and several police officers were hurt. Considered a slow response since these people listened to him and genuinely believe his false claims the election was stolen.
We want Trump! We want Trump!
This will be remembered as a brutal day for American democracy, making the transition of power all the more difficult for the incoming president.
You go pepper spray! Pull them this way! Pull them!
Demonstrators who'd been gathering at the Capitol and marched there today breached the Capitol building. Hundreds of protesters, our reporters on the scene tell us, could be seen. They were pushing back police. People were waving Trump flags. Thousands probably could be, surrounded the building, climbing up walls. We're seeing, people inside the building. The House and the Senate were in session when this happened.
Smashing windows and shots fired. The United States Capitol building breached by a violent mob of President Trump's supporters.
Protesters entered the Senate chamber and even sat in the seat of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
A curfew now in effect in Washington, D.C. until 6 a.m. And right now, Congress has resumed counting Electoral College votes after being escorted in by armed guards.
And speaking of breaching the U.S. Capitol, we apparently have a still photo of a protester on the Speaker's rostrum, the Speaker's podium.
There it is.
There it is, in the House chamber, which is remarkable.
Let's not keep it up long, though. Let's not glorify this.
But
let's be honest.
We also have video that we've seen
it.
from Frank Thorpe, our Senate producer, that they are inside the Senate chamber as well. There you go. And just to think about this, they have gotten to the second floor of the Capitol. That's right next to Mike Pence's office. All the senators, we are told, are safe and are in secure locations. There are underground ways to exit the Capitol building itself. On 9/11, they went over to the Library of Congress. There are lots of buildings in the area that are all interconnected.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us, but you have to go home now. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special.